The Enforcement Directorate has issued fresh summons to Neville Roy Singham, who is a Shanghai-based American businessman, in connection with its money laundering probe against news portal NewsX. Officials have said that summons have been sent through the MEA. A similar attempt to serve summons to the businessman was blocked by China last year. Multiple questions are being raised now about the situation. Was NewsX just the front through which the Chinese were trying to influence elections? Who else may be working for China as ED has issued these summons? What else is China doing to influence 2024 and the Lok Sabha elections? Before we slip into this discussion, let us first know more about Neville Roy Singham himself. And to talk more about this issue and agenda is Ambassador Manju Seth, former diplomat, who's joining us. Savio Rodriguez, founder and editor-in-chief of the Goa Chronicles, also joins us on the show. Professor D.K. Giri, international affairs expert on the program. Last but not the least, Gautam Mukherjee, senior journalist, also with us on this all-important show. I'm going to go to the big screen and try and tell you who this man is and why is he wanted in India and what has he been trying to do to influence a number of events in our country. Of course, here he is. His name is Neville Roy Singham. His parents are Archibald Singham, the Sri Lankan political scientist, and mother is Shirley Hune, associate provost of Hunter College. And like I already said, he lives in Shanghai, has been in fact found a part of a trail that leads all the way to Shanghai. He's a member of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. He's also a member of the Black Nationalist Maoist group, is what we know about him so far. His education is, of course, quite remarkable. He went to the Harvard University. He's been running multiple businesses. A few of them have been very, very successful. He's also the co-founder of ThoughtWorks, which is a Chicago-based IT consulting company. We're not really sure what kind of consultancy he's into, but so far this is the information that we have on him. He sold ThoughtWorks for $785 million. That's close to $1 billion, and of course that makes him very powerful when it comes to spending money. Well, the ED has opened up a probe on Neville Roy Singham. The amount that we're talking about here is 380 million rupees. World Media Holdings Justice and Education Fund is where this money has been spent. The G-Span LLC, the Tricontinental Institute, is also where some of this money went. Of course, it came all through him. And People's Dispatch, which is promoting pro-Chinese narrative, is also a part of this kitty which this man has financed, which this man has facilitated. I'm going to start my show with Savio Rodriguez. Savio, he's obviously an enemy of the state, but what really surprises me, astonishes me, that he's had this free run for quite some time with people who have supported him within our country. The ED has gotten to all these details now, but do you feel that a large amount of damage has already been done by this man? And China, of course, is going to throw everything but the kitchen sink in making sure that this man is not extradited to India.
See, Vineet, through different sources of investigation that's happening on Neville Roy Singham, it is very clearly evident that there is a hand in China in the propaganda intent that Neville Roy Singham has. Now, let me give you an example, because I was witness to one of the consulting editors' discussion on Manipur. Now, that happened primarily because I went to Manipur as well, and not once, but a couple of times. And I managed to get a lot of footage out of what's happening in the crisis in Manipur. And I was looking at working on a documentary. On a similar line, a former, South Asia Bureau head of the CGTN also went to Manipur and also gathered this kind of data and footage for the promotions that the journalists wanted to do. And that's when the consulting editor of what you would call NewsX, approached her, and she approached me, and she was like, "Can you help us get some footage since you were there?" And we got into a conversation, and this gentleman was of the opinion that we have to put out the fact that Manipur was something that was terribly wrong done by the current government in the center, deliberately done, and by the government at the state, which, in all fairness, is not the truth. It was not a religious conflict that happened in Manipur. It was primarily, like we've been saying from day one, the intent of a proxy war going on in Manipur by terrorists that are working with extremist groups in Manipur, and therefore they sort of ignited or instigated an ethnic strife between the Maitis and the Cookies, and that's what you've seen, which is why 2 3 days ago the government of India actually came out on a ban on 9 Maiti terrorist extremist groups that were there. That's the PLA Manipur, the UKLF, the KYKL, to name some of them, who were very instrumental. And these groups worked with Myanmar terrorist groups and are funded by China. So there was an intent. Now, with that one example, I can tell you that there was a deliberate intent by this representative of NewsClick to actually create a fear psychosis in the minds of the minorities in Manipur towards the Indian government. Of course, there are certain factors on Manipur which I have come out openly and stated that there have been errors that have been done by the state government and by the Indian government as well. But to deliberately portray it as an intent to target the Kuki community or the Christian community by the Meiteis, which are considered to be Hindus, is a very biased and a very diabolical intent of the conflict, which still continues. And therefore, I am going to look at NewsClick and people like Neville Roy Singham with the question mark, because I know Manipur is a proxy war of China with India. And if Neville Roy Singham is connected to China, which is clearly evident, then there is an intent to create an instability in Manipur and other northeast regions using, news platforms such as NewsClick. Because honestly, on April 29th, I keep repeatedly saying it, foreign media was already present in Manipur before the conflict erupted. How did foreign media know? The only thing that was supposed to happen on May 3rd was the peaceful protest that was planned by the Kuki community against the SC order on scheduled tribes. So how did anyone of the foreign media know that it was going to erupt into something uncontrollable? And therefore, Neville Roy Singham, NewsClick must be continued to be investigated, and foreign media that are connected to trying to create a false narrative and to spread communal hatred need to be kept in check. And I think ED is doing a fabulous job as far as going after Neville Roy Singham and NewsClick.
Right. You're absolutely right. And Gautam, in fact, Neville Roy Singham has also been implicated in some of the protests that have taken place in the United States against Israel and have been pro-Palestinian in nature. He is wealthy. He's accumulated that chunk of cash when he sold his company, and he's been putting it to misuse. Why has he been out of the radar, especially the American radar, for so long?
Well, it reminds me quite a lot of Kim Philby and the various, Oxford spies that went across to the Soviet Union at that point in time. And these were influential, connected people, highly educated, and they were committed to communism. So the only real answer I have as to why Neville Roy is, a conduit for Chinese designs is because he's a committed Maoist in the Chairman Mao mold, which is also something that Xi aspires to, Xi Jinping. So the point is that they're pretty sophisticated. And now the warfare that we have to also develop more and more as the time goes on is along similar lines, because you have people who actually are the prime movers, and then you have people who have their own motives, which may not be identical, let's say with Chinese motives, who will support them. For example, the Islamists, for example, the Khalistanis, for example, the drug lords. the Kashmiris. All of these people are part and parcel of an agenda which is inimical to Indian interests, but they're quite happy to go along. And of course, the money pipeline is not restricted to Neville Roy Singham's money alone. It is backed by all of these forces, Soros. It is pretty dangerous, and it is being tried now on a very regular basis. Not only do we have a Maoist insurgency in central India involving 5 or 6 states, wherever there is a forest, there's a Maoist, which has gone on for decades. But you've got also this northeastern insurgency also going on for decades and flaring up at times like this when we are approaching a general election of great import. This general election, if it goes in favor of the Modi administration, will mean a 3rd consecutive term. And this is something that shakes all these forces down to their roots. And they are doing everything possible to create internal strife and depend on those forces in India, including portions of the higher judiciary, various parts of the administration, and of course the opposition in cahoots with all of these forces. So it is something to watch out for and something to counter in our own way. It's not just cyber security, it is out and out propaganda, spying, etc. We don't know if India has anything to do with these unknown warriors who are popping these people in Pakistan. But that is also something very interesting in terms of what is called for in Canada as well. So let us see what happens here.
Ambassador Manju said, in fact, this man has been flagged dangerous by a number of countries in the past as well. And would you believe it that he's also in fact responsible for TikTok's algorithmic reach? The Chinese have trusted him so much. He's obviously a danger to India and perhaps even the rest of the world.
Yes, I agree, Vineet. I think there seems to be more than meets the eye in all this. And I think the ED would definitely be acting on certain, concrete evidence that is available with them. And that's why these summons have been issued. And even before they had issued it, they'd sent it, asked the Chinese government, because he's based in Shanghai, to help with his extradition or his questioning, etc. But they did not at all oblige. So I think there are these are all indications and of this of the nature of this person's activities, of Neville Roy's activities, and his intent, along with the Chinese government, it seems, to build a narrative. And as Mr. Rodriguez said, that there is it's something which is scary. What is happening in Manipur? In any case, it's not only in Manipur but on all the Maoist infested areas. There is definitely Chinese funding flowing in, Chinese arms flowing in, and from Myanmar also we see, through Myanmar, all those insurgents from Myanmar who keep coming into India, they are able to be mixed with the local communities and create this kind of unrest in the country, in the northeast. So I think China's intent seems very clear, and they are working now through these other. They've tried at the border. They've tried everything to to harass India, to keep troubling India, and to put India down. And I think these are this is another tactic through the media to build a kind of anti-India narrative within the country, using the Indian, they're calling it the Indian media, but NewsClick, I don't know if it is an Indian, if it's Indian in that sense, but they say that it is Indian Indian journalists who are in that organization, and they're independent, and they are very and since they talk against the government, and therefore they are being targeted. I don't think it is as simple as that. It is not as simple as that. Just because you talk against the government, it doesn't mean that you will be targeted. There has to be something more. That may be one aspect of it, but I think there has to be something more, and that information and intelligence, I think, may have been available. And as the New York Times report, again, we don't know how true that was, but the New York Times report also suggested this. And it may well be that China is now trying these tactics of building a narrative within India against the government. And of course, as mentioned by Mr. Gautam, the elections are coming, and now people are trying, there are many forces which are trying to ensure that the next election does not permit the current government to come back. There are many forces. And also, the opposition, though it's, doesn't seem to be having a lot of coherence. I don't want to comment on the politics of it, but I think there is a kind of something bringing them together, and that could not, there could not be. It's not a very good sign for the country and its democracy if things are being subverted from outside, and by creating a narrative which is not, which could well be, China sponsored.
Professor Giri, where do you stand on this? Do you think this man is in cahoots with China and is trying to propagate their cause and their narrative and influence, the oppressive behavior of China towards the adversaries of China, through technology?
Obviously, there is no doubt about it, and I joined the panel in calling out China for its devious activities in India, and China is targeting India. I'm glad that ED is going after one of the Chinese agents, but I endorse the sentiments of the fellow panelists, but my only concern is that what has been our China policy. You see, I think in your channel I have said I give 10 out of 10 to the present government on its foreign policy on various aspects, except China. China, our government has fumbled. And it is really late in the day to take on China in many ways. And we do not have a Chinese policy, actually, whether accommodating China or containing China, confronting China. It is not clear to me. So this is a good step that ED is chasing this man. But we should have a more comprehensive, stronger policy towards China, expose it internationally. And China is using the famous Sun Tzu's tactics of the art of war with India, knowing the leadership and through their deception and stretching out in terms of time and patience. And they're doing it in India for a long time, starting from Chou En-lai and Nehru, up to Xi Jinping and Modi. But somehow India has not been able to counter Chinese, diplomacy or aggression on India. They still occupy 4,500 square kilometers of Indian territory, and our government says that koi nahi aaya hai to India. I mean, this is ridiculous. That in a way implies the legitimization of Chinese occupation of 4,500 square kilometers of Indian territory. They're still, through the salami tactics, through various means, they're still nipping away Indian territory. But we are at a loss, really, how the government is reacting. That's my only disappointment. We know what China is doing. China is a menace to the world security, world system, and India, why is India fumbling against our biggest
You're absolutely right, sir. And Savio, the big question that comes to my mind is that, for the lack of a better word, Savio, how do these people, these technology billionaires come to be, for the lack of a better word, radicalized by the agenda that China has? In fact, even his wife, Jodie Evans, she runs a campaign which started in 2017, which has a hashtag, a very popular hashtag called China is not our enemy. In fact, she's gone on record. She's conducted a number of webinars across the world dismissing the structure and the oppression of the Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. How does China do this? How do they radicalize these people? Do they really need China?
Vineet, China is one nation, and in all due credit to them, they have understood the art of political and geopolitical war quite well. So they have only one enemy per se. That one enemy is the United States of America, and they have over the last several decades done exactly that: infiltrated universities, infiltrated businesses. In fact, most of the money that you see in America right now would be China money. You have them also targeting India, but they don't see India as that large a threat yet. But they will look at India, and they have been looking at India. Now you have an organization like I'd exposed a couple of years ago called the International Liaison Department of the Communist Party of China. This was the department that the Congress General Secretary at that point of time, Rahul Gandhi, signed an MOU with. Now the International Liaison Department is primarily a foreign covert intelligence agency. They work with politicians, they work with media influencers, they work with society influencers in order to push China agenda, China propaganda, everything that works in the interest of China. Let's take Sri Lanka, for example. If you look at Sri Lanka right now, what did China do with Sri Lanka? China did the classic debt trap to Sri Lanka. And today Sri Lanka, whether it likes it or not and wants to get away from the debt trap that it is in, it still remains in a debt trap because they've taken so much of money from China. And that's what China has been doing with most poor countries in the Asian region as well as in the African region. So China is loaded with money. China is very firm and very aggressive. China understands how politics has to be played. It understands it needs the left narrative to be permeated in places like United States and in India. And that's exactly what it's tying up with. It's tying up with people that actually go ahead, that are radicalized, that are left. Imagine they support the Hamas, they support Iran, but they aren't supporting the Muslims in China itself. So everybody knows the China's hypocrisy, but nobody's going to call it out because everybody's in bed with China in some form or the other. So the only way China can be defeated is from within China. And within the next 5 to 10 years, China will see its own radicalism from its own people who are sick and fed up of the way China has been going on in the current format with Xi Jinping as its leader. So change is inevitable. At some point of time, when you pull a rubber band too harsh, it's going to snap, and that's what's going to happen to China. China is losing its control. The BRI, the Belt Road Initiative in certain regions, countries like Philippines have come out and said we don't want the BRI initiative in our country. Sri Lanka wants to get out of the debt trap that it is, and that's where it's turning to India for help. So China is losing some part of its foothold as far as the Asian and some parts of the African countries are concerned. But they are a strong force. They are a very confident force and very focused.
Right. Well articulated, sir. We appreciate you joining us. And on that note, we've run out of time. Would like to thank all my guests for being a part of this incisive conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.